This is Chapter 10, and as you can see, it is gases. So we'll spend about a week on this chapter, and it should be pretty much review for you, because you did a real good job last year with whatever teacher you had. So just looking at some of the characteristics of gases, some of the differences that you're probably already familiar with, is that for gas particles, they're really far apart from each other, unlike solids and liquids. You can do a lot of interesting things with gases. You can compress them. You can change the volumes by changing the temperature or pressure. So they have a lot of properties that are manipulable, if that's a word, manipulable. Anyways, as far as pressure goes, that is a formula you probably remember at some point or another. It is the force over the area. Easy enough. As far as pressure units go, there's several that we're comfortable with, and we'll come on to those here in just a little bit. So here we go. What is a Pascal? A Pascal is a Newton per meter squared. Bars, it's very common. We talk about this in class. They use them a lot in the weather, but we will not use bars in here at all. But we do see the comparison to what they are. Okay, so a barometer, which is what this setup is here, we notice that with this drawing, what it shows is the atmosphere exerts a certain pressure on everything, and we can see that displayed in a barometer. This downward pressure of the atmosphere will support a total of 760 millimeters of mercury in a column, or about 34 feet of water. So that is what we would call standard pressure. And of course that's also equal to 1 atm. This little gizmo here is called a manometer. So if we can contain a gas in this container, we can measure its outward pressure. And for example, in this little picture here, normally in a manometer it should be an equal level because gravity is pulling it all down equally. And atmospheric pressure is pushing down in the column equally. When in this scenario we have a gas here under some specific temperature conditions, and we notice that it is pushing the mercury further out. Well, we already know that the downward pressure is atmospheric, so that's going to be, in this case, 760. And let's just pretend this height is 10 millimeters. The gas is also pushing not only atmospheric pressure, but the additional 10 millimeters of height difference. So the total pressure of the gas in this case would be 770 millimeters of mercury. And of course, if it was going the other direction where it was higher on the gas side over here, then we would do a subtraction from 760, that the atmosphere was higher pressure than the gas itself. And what this is useful for is looking at a gas pressure in regards to temperature. That would be what it's most useful for. So these are our standard pressure measurements, and again, you're very familiar with these, so we won't spend any time on that. Boyle's law, looking at this little graphic here, we can see if we're under some standard conditions, in this case it's 760 millimeters of mercury, if we double that pressure, and it's kind of nice we can do this by simply adding an additional 760 millimeters of mercury, literally, we'll notice that the volume of the contained gas is cut in half. So interesting comparison. So we notice that they have this inverse relationship, which is nice. If we graph it out, we can see all these various points coming into play. And again, this is an inverse relationship graph. What something is difficult is making predictions in the future or what it would be on either side. So what would my value be over here? I can guess, but not quite accurately. And the same scenario over here. What is nice is we can take the inverse of the pressure, which is done over here, and it turns into a linear relationship. And mathematically, we can make really good predictions about what it would be further out this way or down this way, extrapolating that information. Charles' law is a comparison between the volume of a gas and the temperature of a gas. So I'll just take a look ahead and see what we have over there. And we can notice that, for example, if we heat a gas, the volume goes up. And if we cool a gas, it goes down. And you've probably seen this if you've ever had a birthday party and you took your balloons from the store out to the car. They go down in volume and they go back up in size when you get them in your house. Okay. So the relationship is as you have it right here, and it looks like it's almost like an inverse, but graphically, if you put that out as you see over there on the right, it ends up being a direct relationship. If one goes up, the other has to go up to keep pace, I guess. So again, the big bonus out of doing that scenario is it helped us predict what would be the volume of a gas at 0 degrees, or what would be the temperature of a gas at 0 volume. And that volume would be, the temperature, I'm all over the place. The temperature would be negative 273 degrees Celsius if the volume was 0. Okay. Avogadro's law, which you may or may not have mentioned at all last year, we can see that equal volumes of gas at the same temperature and same pressure will contain equal number of molecules. What we're actually putting in this little graphic here is they're showing that under the same temperature and pressure conditions, they will have the same volume, and they will also contain the same number of particles. But notice that the mass is different depending upon whatever gas you're talking about. So I think something we can take away from that is, regardless of the mass of the sample gas, it's going to have the same volume and it's going to have the same number of particles. Okay? So ideal gas equation. We've had these three laws we put in there, and we could also put in Gay-Lussac's law, which shows that I guess we're dealing with pressure there. So we could say that pressure is proportional to temperature. They didn't do that in here because it is enclosed in the other ones in different parts. But if we put all those together, we can get the ideal gas equation. But there is that one weird constant that we have to deal with, which is R. And R is a combination of the others. So if we say R is equal to pressure times volume over the number of moles times temperature, which is in Kelvin, we can end up with this equation here. I usually cut this off and just call it 1. And then we see the other equations that are in here as well. We can express in regards to energy or calories in that expression, and a few others. So we have various ones. And again, you will always have these with you on the AP exam or any test we take in our class. So no need to memorize those values. So there's our equation, and again, you're very familiar with that. No big deal. These two equations here are just derivations of that. This top one, if you were trying to solve for density, you either need to be able to create this equation or just memorize it. I don't believe it's on the sheet for you, so you have to be able to derive it. What is the worth of it? Is using the ideal gas equation, you could solve for the density of some unknown gas, and that is something they might be able to find on a table, and it's something that's beneficial. And the same thing with molar mass. If I had a list of potential options for this gas, I could go through and given various amounts of information. For example, this might be grams up here instead of density and volume. I could figure out what the molar mass of this gas was. Okay. Next one over here is partial pressures, and the main thing to take away from this is every gas in a mixture behaves as if the other gases are not even present. So you would think, for example, if this was like 1,000 ATMs, that it would be exerting some type of characteristics or behavior onto the other gases, but it does not. As long as these gases are not reacting with each other, that's the key part, they're not reacting with each other, they act independent. So for example, if this gas here had this type of a pressure value, it's behaving as if that's the only gas in the container. Now additively, as we can see, the total pressure is whatever these three gases actually sum up to be. But they do act independently of each other. This is just the idea of showing how you can collect a gas. If I had a reaction vessel over here in labeled number 1, and we have the reaction going, it is bubbled into a container and it'll displace water in there. We can measure the gas and determine what the volume of that gas would be at a specific temperature, but we have to account for atmospheric pressure, which we see here, and the temperature of this water, which we're going to do a lab on this and we'll talk more about it. But in this container, we have two gases. We have the gas we're collecting from the reaction, but you also have some water vapor because you're collecting it over water. And that's based on a temperature. So again, we'll talk more about that in class. All right, good place to take a break, and we'll start lecture number 2 next.